Today we are talking about etiquette and afternoon tea. This guide will show you how you can enjoy your time whether you're having tea at home and hosting guests, or if you're headed out to a prestigious establishment to enjoy a fine dining experience.
No, just like this.
Oh.
Pinch, you just pinch.
Oh.
That's it. And then you hold it and it rests because they are very fine. You can see why they usually say you look into the tea. And so why? Because the original ones, this is a beautiful teacup. When do we start the afternoon tea? How did it start? The afternoon tea, the idea, the tradition of the afternoon tea started in the 19th century. It was in the mid-1840s, and it was the 7th Duchess of Bedford, Anna Maria Russell, who, obviously being from the aristocracy, started to feel a bit peckish in the middle of the afternoon.
Peckish.
Because in those days, in the 19th century, people used to have 2 meals a day. They didn't overeat, and that's why, in this case, the 7th Duchess of Bedford felt a bit peckish, so she ordered to have her staff to have something prepared for her to eat. And the idea was the idea of the afternoon tea. They prepared something to eat, something to drink. The tea was a commodity at the time. And then she invited some of her friends, and they started to have this afternoon tea when they socialized while they were drinking tea and having something to eat, and it became very popular. And that's how the whole thing of the afternoon tea started. Now, what's the difference between an afternoon tea, low tea, and high tea, and royal tea? The term low tea is called low tea because they used to have the tea sitting at low tables and low chairs, the sofas and the low chairs, and that's why it's called the low tea. And the high tea, because the tables were high, the members of the staff of the household will have an afternoon tea late in the afternoon, and that was the main dinner. They would have had something to do with meat and something more substantial, and that's why it's called the high tea, because of the high tables. Nowadays, at times people confuse the term high tea because it sounds more sophisticated, but it refers to the type of tables. And then the royal tea, some hotels, they call it royal tea because then you can have some champagne or cava, Spanish cava, or sparkling wine, prosecco, and that's why they call it the royal tea. And also, from a marketing point of view, it sounds better. And what we're having this afternoon here is the afternoon tea. It usually you can have it anytime between 2, 3, and 5 o'clock, and then usually you have it before your dinner or supper. Some people call it dinner, some people call it supper. The word dinner comes from the French word dîner, and that's why.
Supper, I've also heard, is lunch.
And it could be depends on the country. Also luncheon. In the old days, it was called the luncheon, and then the supper comes from the word soup, souper in French, because you will have the soup. So. But at times, depending, some people, even in England, they are saying, I'm having my tea, meaning I'm having my dinner. And having said that, I'm going to try the egg sandwich. Because, do you have egg? Would you like to try?
Oh, yeah. And with this one, do you grab it by this, or do you use your tongs? Yes?
Yeah, because it's bigger. So, whatever, in this case, it would be more convenient because you couldn't have it with the tongs, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is a nice touch to have the tongs. So the idea is that you don't usually, when you have a communal plate with the batter or the dip, you don't dip with your utensils, and if you use your fingers, then you can just have it. You can even have it with your fingers, and you never lick your fingers because it's considered, well, for hygienic reasons. But there is a great appreciation, precisely, of the eating. Goes back to the a conversation we had, how to live well, how to lead a good life, and from a moral point of view, ethical and aesthetically, and whether the type of conversation you have, how you set your table, how you conduct yourself at home or with friends or in public. And this is something that, yes, some of the traditions change. For example, the invention of the fork in medieval times, for example, you wouldn't have seen it in in the 8th century, or having the champagne, or even having the tea in the 12th century, you wouldn't have. They didn't have this. So things changed. The tradition changed, but the idea of enjoying life and enjoying, but not only enjoying the things that you have in front of it, is to show dignity for yourself and the respect for the people you are having the dinner with, or you're having a conversation with. It will never die out. There will always be people who appreciate that and value that, and they replicate that and share that with other people, and others who don't. The same with people who are interested in music, classical music, or the arts and high culture with capital C, and others who don't. People who will enjoy a nice cup of coffee, espresso, sitting, and others who will just grab something on the street and eat something on the street, whereas others, they might say, no, if you are eating, try to eat sitting at the table. Something to suggest that it's not really a dying art. It's because there are more and more establishments, hotels especially, when they are still offering the afternoon tea. Whereas maybe 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you didn't see as many. For example, if you go to London or some parts in Europe, in some hotels. So people are starting to appreciate it. And now even if you go to the internet, there are more and more people interested in how to make great meals. And the cooking is always been there, and people want to do better. Not everybody, but there are lots of women and men who want to make something that is better in terms of baking or cooking, but also sitting at the table. And the idea of having the afternoon teas, then you can have a pleasant conversation. We can have another video about how to have a pleasant conversation. What makes a conversation a good conversation? And the main point of having a conversation is being interested in the other person, rather than sounding interesting, rather than talking about yourself all the time. Try to ask open-ended questions to the other person. You can have something like this at home. So you can make your own sandwiches. It doesn't have to be like this, but the idea is invite people over, 1, 2, or 3 people, and then it takes time to prepare it, and it's the thoughtfulness, right? The idea is when you're hosting something, as you know, is the thoughtfulness, the time, the dedication that you put into making sure that your guests, your friends are well looked after, and then they have a good time. That's the whole idea. Yeah. And at home, you can have your afternoon tea. You have a pot. You can choose your tea, and then you can have sandwiches and something sweet. It doesn't have exactly to be like this, like the scones, and it's more informal. But at the same time, you can make it pleasant, and it's a good excuse to entertain people without having to make a whole dinner.
Entering the room in a restaurant. If you're having the afternoon tea in a restaurant or in a hotel offering the afternoon tea, the server will enter first, followed by the guest, and then followed by the host. Or it can also be the host followed by the guest if there is no server. Let's talk about invitations. Invitations for the afternoon tea may be extended and accepted by telephone, face-to-face, or by mailing them at least a week in advance. Invitations may be informal, and if you really want to be fancy, they can be engraved, can be handwritten in calligraphy or by a calligraphy font. What do I wear for the afternoon tea? Well, afternoon tea is a relaxing experience, but it's somewhat formal, so you don't want to look like a mess. It's best not to wear sneakers or jeans. Try to wear business casual at the minimum, because it's a great reason to get dressed up. And the sitting arrangement. Obviously, how are you going to sit? Well, the guest is always assigned the best seat in the room, and the host or hostess sits to the left of the guest. If a guest is a lady, the host will assist her when sitting by standing behind the chair and pushing the chair towards her as she sits at the table. How to sit? How do you sit? When you are sitting at the table, make sure that you don't have your elbows on the table, because for practical reasons, at times If the table is not stable, you might tip the table. Also, your elbows might be dirty. So you can have your wrists against the border of the table, and also the hands could be just on your lap. And the legs, make sure that you just have the 90-degree angle. Don't put your legs behind the chair. Sit straight and comfortable.
Well, the minute you sit and you're at the table, you get the napkin, and then you put the napkin on your lap. Then as you sit, you get the napkin, and then you unfold it basically around the table in an inconspicuous way. And there are two ways of doing it. You can fold it like this and then have this side against you, or my personal preference is the opposite. So that you can have the napkin like this, fold it into, so that when you have to clean your fingers, you can just do it in an inconspicuous way. Or when you have to clean your lips, you just do it, you dab your lips, and then you just put it in like this, half folded, and then it's tidy and it's clean.
When it comes to holding the menu, make sure that you hold the menu in a 45-degree angle against the border of the table. One tip is to even have a chance to look at the menu before you go to the restaurant, maybe online. And then the host will assist with the menu selection. At times, as a guest, you might ask your host or hostess, what do you recommend? And then the host or the hostess will give you some guidance of what's best, and even within the price range. And also important, when you are ordering, ask your server, could I have those social graces, rather than saying, I will have this, right? Asking the question is always more polite than giving the direct instruction. And always followed by please and thank you. And when it comes to ordering either the afternoon tea or having your lunch or dinner, don't be too demanding with your waiter, and don't make a scene with your waiter. Never make a scene, right? It will make everybody around your table uncomfortable, ruining their dining experience. And always try to be discreet. For example, unless the food is off, don't send it back, and don't make negative comments about the food or drinks. It may put off people sitting at the table. And how do you order? How to order? First, select an afternoon tea set menu. Especially in the hotels, they will give you a set menu, and there are usually only one or two options, with or without champagne. And everyone at the table orders their own afternoon tea, so the pricing is per person, and you do not choose the individual food items in the set menu. And then pick a tea. You can choose a tea, and on the menu, flip to the page with a list of teas, and usually you will have a choice of black tea, green tea, white tea, herbal tea. Those are usually the traditional typical options to choose from. The traditional tea to have with afternoon tea is black tea. If you are sensitive to caffeine, or if it's maybe for children, then go with a herbal tea. And the pot of tea will come out first, followed by the food, and you can pour the tea and drink it before the food arrives at the table. If you are vegetarian or you have food allergies, let them know when you make the reservation and when you place your order after you are seated. Most places will accommodate this request. How do you excuse yourself? Well, first of all, if you are having lunch, dinner, or afternoon tea, if you really need to leave the table because you need to go to the washroom, all you have to say is, will you please excuse me, or excuse me for a second. You don't have to, please don't tell anybody where you are going, because it's understood. And also, if you may have to answer a phone call, it's a given that your phone is going to be on silent. You can also alert the people around the table that you are expecting an important phone call. Then in that case, you will say, will you please excuse me? Try to leave the table in between courses. That's also another tip.
Having the soup, you have the specific spoon. This is for the soup. There are two types of soup spoons. One is more pointed, usually when there are some chunks of meat or fish, and this one is specifically for this type of soup or consommé. And then you hold it like this, resting, and then you usually have the soup from the center to the side, and gently then you can just drink. So when you are eating, while you are having your soup, then you scoop it to the side, and then make sure that when you touch the rim, and then you have it. And if you want to have a break, just leave the spoon on the side, especially when you finish. You don't leave the spoon inside this type of bowls, except when it's a soup plate, then you can have it leave it when you finish on the plate. But in this type of case, that's why it comes with a little saucer so that you can rest the spoon.
Do you rest it on the inside or the outside?
Like this. So it's easy.
On the side.
It's easy, and then you just, because it's partly when it comes to etiquette is how easy and convenient and the practicalities, right? When it's the afternoon tea, when it's the tea is different. You can place the teaspoon behind, and we're having is a cauliflower soup. And obviously, one of the things when it comes to having soup, we don't slurp, we don't rush it, we just enjoy it, and not try to fill the spoon because you can spill it.
How much do you lean over?
Well, just a bit so that you don't drop it. You don't have to be over the plate, just in such a way that you can just be leaning a bit so that if something drops, it can drop on the plate, right? And then you bring the spoon to your mouth. You don't bring the mouth to the spoon. So just lift it, bring it, and have it. It's just practice makes perfect. So it's a question of practicing, because rather than having to do the movement constantly, to just try to be inconspicuous, more refined, more elegant.
How's everything tasting over here?
It's good.
Fantastic.
Very good, thank you.
Of course.
The other thing is when we are eating, we don't have to put the elbows like this. Just try to be as close and not too tight, because we're not doing any exercise. But just relax, casual, but without having to do this. Just natural. It's a more natural movement, like scooping and then drinking, right?
How do you serve drinks and how do you drink? Usually, the drinks, you will notice that the drinks are always to your right. The reason for that is practical. You usually serve from the left. The server will serve from the left, and even when you are with your friends or family, you pass from the left to the right. For practical reasons, most people are right-handed. And also, while you have the drinks on your right, it's easier to serve from the right. You are replenishing, you are filling your glasses. Typically, you will see the water goblet above the knife to your right. The knife is always to the right of the plate. And above the knife, you will have the water goblet. Then next to the right of the water glass, you will have the glass for the white wine. To the right of the white wine, the glass for the red wine. And then if you're having champagne, cava, or prosecco, to the right of the glass. And then the coffee cup or the teacup is always also to the right. When you are serving wine, you always have the glass up to the middle. And when before you serve yourself, you always offer the drink, the wine or the water to the person to your left. And then if you are having to pass something from the left to the right, before you serve yourself, you offer it to the person to the left, and then you pass it to the person sitting to your right.
And then when you have to drink, let's say from the glass, you have just been eating something, this is important, you dab your lips gently, and then just put it back. And then before you drink, always clean your lips, dab your lips, and then you can drink from the glass. Usually, once again, it's about you drink like in a 45 angle, and try to drink from the same place. My trick is usually at times they come with a name of the glass. Try to drink from the same place so that you don't see the people around you, don't see the glass without having to lift your head to the back. So in a sort of, all the movements is sort of gentle, quiet, inconspicuous, sort of flows. The same with the conversation. The idea is while you are enjoying the afternoon tea or the dinner or the lunch, you just do it enjoyable, and also the conversation, which is part of having the dinners.
Now you're holding that glass by the stem.
Right.
Is it practical to lift this glass by the stem?
No, with the glass you can hold it like for the water you hold it like this. The water goblet. When it's wine, red wine, white wine, or champagne, or sparkling, or cava, you hold it by the stem. The reason for that is because then you don't see any fingerprints, and also the other reason is you don't. The drink is cold. You don't warm the drink. So there are two practicalities. One is more refined. You don't see the fingerprints, and also because you keep the temperature of the wine, especially when it's white wine or sparkling wine. And you try to sip. You don't have to drink the whole glass. And even when you are serving, this is important. You don't usually serve the wine or the water up to the edge of the glass. Usually with the red wines or white wines, you just fill it up to the middle. And then you just have a sip.
Let's talk about the pot of tea. Each person chooses their own tea and it will be served in a teapot. The pot of tea is served first before the food comes out. If you finish your pot of tea and want more, just ask for hot water, which can be poured into your pot of tea.
And when you hold the cup of tea, this is the perfect cup of tea. You just make sure that you have the index finger and the thumb in between, holding it the handle, and then the third one, the index, resting like this. Right? You can have it like this. You can have it. Some people prefer it like this. And then when you drink your tea, looking inside the cup, and you just have a sip, take a sip, and then you put it down as quietly as possible. If you have used the teaspoon, if you had milk, then when you stir the milk or the sugar, you do it from 12 to 6, and you never clink the cup. And when for example, you have the milk, you do this, and then 1, 2, 3, and then just put it quietly as possible behind, so that you can keep drinking and enjoying your cup of tea. When you're looking inside the cup, and actually this nice cup has a beautiful decoration inside. That's why you can look into it.
A few do's and don'ts about etiquette. The pinky finger down. The proper way to hold a teacup is to use your thumb and index finger to hold onto the handle. The third finger rests on the handle, and the pinky is not to be raised or sticking out. It's considered unsophisticated and not proper. What about the utensils? Never place a utensil directly back on the table after it has been used. After a knife or fork has been used, place it on a dish. And the same goes for your napkin. Once it has placed on your lap, never put the napkin back on the table. Instead, put the napkin on your seat if you need to leave the table. And the teaspoon. Don't drink the tea with the spoon still in the cup. After using your teaspoon to stir it, the sugar or the milk without touching the edge of the cup, try not to make any noise, and then you can place the spoon on the saucer behind the teacup as quietly as possible. The teacup and the saucer. The proper etiquette is to keep the teacup and the saucer no more than 12 inches away from each other. If you are sitting up at the table, you shouldn't need to raise the saucer with the teacup. If you are finished with the food and are leaning back away from the low table, pick up the saucer but keep it at waist level while you sip from the teacup. The first course, the afternoon tea, is the tea sandwiches. The tea sandwiches are small and bite-sized, to be eaten with your fingers, not with a knife and fork, and they are usually made crustless to make it easier to eat and to give it a more delicate look. Classics are cucumber, egg salad, and smoked salmon, but you can choose something else.
Help yourself to the sandwiches. So there's an order, there's a hierarchy, like there is in life. So first we start with the sandwiches,
okay.
The savory, the sandwiches, then we have the scones with the savory, with the cream, and then we finish.
Keep going, yeah.
And then we finish with the desserts, with the sweets. You will notice that the sandwiches don't have crust. Mm-hmm. And the idea of why they don't have crust is because in the old days, the bread was made at home and the crust was really hard. So if you made sandwiches, it would be hard to chew. So it's more convenient, it's easier to have a sandwich with no crust. Nowadays, well, we have soft bread, white bread. So that's the reason why there is no crust, because some people might say, "Oh, it's too sophisticated." Well, originally, because of the crust, it was too hard, and lots of people in Victorian times didn't have teeth; they had lost their teeth. So it's true. So therefore, having to choose something, eat something with the crust, it would be more difficult.
Now, I do offer that if you would like to have my cherry sandwich, you may.
And what about the egg?
The egg I will have.
And you can see why it's the perfect afternoon. I mean, it's almost like a brunch, isn't it?
Yes.
You can, and depending on, you can have it at home. The idea is you don't have to come to a place like that. Oh, thank you.
Any more of these sandwiches for yourself?
Yes, please. Salmon, please.
Yes, sir, of course.
That's great. Thank you.
Not a problem.
So this is about the sandwiches. Do you know the story of the sandwich? Who invented the sandwich?
Who invented the sandwich? No.
It was somebody whose name was Sandwich. His surname was Sandwich, and then he was addicted to playing cards. He was addicted, or he played cards all the time. And at one point, he was getting hungry. Well, he must have asked for something to be prepared. So while he was holding the cards, he could be eating, which is a very practical idea of, you don't have to have a whole meal. You can be doing something else while you are eating.
Practical.
So that's the main contribution of the English to the culinary arts, the invention of the sandwich.
Second course is scones. The scones are served with clotted cream and jam, traditionally, and the scone is placed on your plate with small scoops of clotted cream and jam. One tip is to have that at the top of your small plate, and a knife is used to spread the cream and jam onto small broken scone pieces, and use your fingers to eat the scones. What is a scone? A scone is a small flour-based shortcake like baked good. They are usually plain, crumbly, dense, and lightly sweetened. The traditional English scones to have with the afternoon tea are round, not triangular, and they are served with jam and clotted cream. The question is, how do you eat scones? If you are at an afternoon or a cream tea service, on the table should be little serving containers filled with clotted cream, preserves or jams, and lemon curd. These little pots are for the table, so no dipping your own knife into them, or even worse, dipping your scone directly into the container. That's a no-no. Instead, use the spoons provided, usually sitting right next to the little bowls, to scoop out small portions onto your plate. Place the spoons back as they do not belong on your plate, and try not to cross-contaminate and use a different spoon for each condiment. Feel free to go in for a second serving of jam and cream if you are finished what's on your plate. You have now got your jam and clotted cream on your plate. Now this is the time to eat the scone. The best method is to break apart the scone into bite-sized pieces using your hands. I like to break it in half vertically when break into half, so you are eating a quarter of the scone at a time. Now you can use your knife to slather on the jam and the cream to your small bite-sized pieces of scone. Do not pre-break the scones, but take off pieces as you go and spread the jam and cream on each piece. How to eat the scones properly? Tips. A huge no-no is making a scone sandwich by putting the two halves together with the cream and jam in the middle. Don't do it. Then the scones are meant to be eaten with your fingers, not a fork. Actually, there really isn't a use for a fork during the entire afternoon tea service. It's strictly a knife and spoon affair. You might use a small fork for the sweets if they are very creamy. Scones are best when they are served warm, so reheat them in your oven. And the last tip is, at the afternoon tea, the scone course is the second course after the tea sandwiches and before the sweets. Jam first or cream first? Well, there are two schools of thought, and here's where the controversy comes in. Some people swear by jam first, then top with cream, and that's the Cornish style from Cornwall. And others, they swear by cream first and then jam, and that's the Devonshire style. Personally, I prefer cream first and then jam. The third course is the sweets. Sweets are to be picked up and eaten with your hands. The sweets are mini pastries that can be eaten in 2 or 3 bites. You may need a dessert fork if your dessert is a bit messy and require a bit assistance. How long is the afternoon tea? Well, afternoon tea usually lasts about 2 hours, and it is always between lunch and dinner. Traditional tea time is 4 o'clock. However, any time between 2 and 5 o'clock may be appropriate. The light meal is not meant to replace dinner, but instead to tide you over until dinner.
Now that you know more about the afternoon tea etiquette, remember to enjoy the experience. Learning the afternoon tea culture and engaging in authentic conversations will undoubtedly elevate your social skills and cultivate relationships.